Welcome to all our friends, viewers, stakeholders, fans of Africa Rise with Susan West. It's a brilliant Sunday today. And as always, I've been looking forward to seeing you. I know we've come up a bit earlier than we scheduled, and that's all right. Um, we just did not want to um, try to make it early and then not able to make it. So as you join this broadcast, do the needful, which is invite your friends and join in on the conversation by sending your questions and comments if you have any, of course. And as usual, in our manner, I'll be reading out your comments as we carry on, of course. Today, my guest, like I said the previous week, is joining us all the way from the United States of America. His name is Miabiye um, Miabiye Kuro. Okay, I'm just bear with me to get the name up again. Um, let's see. I must get this name because it's a language that I speak. Okay, Miabiye Koromiema. Yes, it just went out my head. Pardon me for that. So, yes, if you haven't liked, followed, or subscribed to our channels, please do so. It's Africa Rise TV on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Um, our discussion today is still going to be around the effects of personality traits on leadership styles. And today, our guest is going to do a little bit of taking individual personalities and helping us understand them from a more scientific point of view. So, without taking too much of your time, I'm going to bring our guest on screen. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, Miabi.
Hello, Susan. Viewers, good afternoon from the United States of America. Probably good evening over there in the UK.
That's right. It's way past 7 p.m. here in the UK. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you might be joining us from. So, Miabi, just really quickly, do you want to do a quick introduction of who you are, what you do, and whatever it is that takes about you?
Okay, thank you, Susan. Because you have mentioned my name. I am Miabiye Oroniema. I am a Nigerian. I'm an African. I'm a Nigerian. I am from the hydrocarbon belt of Nigeria, commonly called Niger Delta region. I started out my school out there, both primary school and my first and second degrees in the university there. So I studied cost engineering, what in Britain called quantity surveying. So I'm a building economist. And then, of course, I went on to do environmental management, environmental socioeconomics, as in environmental management. I have done a lot of programs. I was part of programs in city. I've been to Berkeley University, done some studies. Currently also have further end another degree maker. That's generally my educational background. I have worked in cultural communications, essentially trying to create creating interface and understanding between walls of cultural differences. Delta, where I had earlier on worked for close to 20 years. For myself, we tried to provide solutions for interface management between the global that was working on the hydrocarbon issues in that place, Shell, Agwell, and all sorts of service companies and so on, who acting with local communities where they mine their hydrocarbon. The whole idea of interfacing, creating some relationships the way they model their social investment policies and their work.
Right.
And I think that built me up to doing personal studies and development to understand communication and cultural context,
right.
and particularly development economics. So, in development communications, which is a type of thing that the type of place where we apply communication. So that generally should be basically what it is. So being a community rights activist.
Thank you very much. That's a lot of aspects to Miabi. Thank you. So yes, Linda Louis Cabela, welcome all the way from Mozambique. Welcome. So let's quickly go into the conversation for today, which is personality traits and how it affects leadership styles. And when we had a conversation behind, in the background, previously, I did mention about a few interesting African personalities that we will be dissecting as much as possible, all the way from Mugabe to Idi Amin to Gaddafi to even Abacha, General Abacha of Nigeria, and as we carry on, I'll remember the rest of them. So basically, what is your understanding, or how would you describe personality traits as, in general terms, Miabi?
Okay, I think from the point of view, people have character traits that we are naturally imbued with. So those the combination of character traits together, let's make it as simple and basic as that. The combination of traits define a person's personality attributes. So personality traits would be those combination of character defines your behavior, your attitude, your reasoning, the way your reasoning aligns with your emotion, and influences your feelings and your conduct about things that you could consider as sort of personality traits. There are only two types of personality: people who are extroverted and people who are introverted. I mean, the extroverts' energy from outside, where they meet people, they engage people, talk with people, they do things outside. So the moment you cut them off, you sort of remove strength, you remove their being from them. They want to be everywhere and they're sociable. There's also the introvert who are more intuitive. They get their strength from within them, so they are very reflective, and you find those trying to think, read, engage from the inside, come out to deliver that in society. So the moment you stop them engaging their depth, you then also sort of see them lose. Those are the broad-based personality traits. Out of these broad-based, people find four fundamental attributes of personality. The choleric people, of course, I mean, if we talk of choleric, to be more illustrative and anecdotal, Jerry Rawlings of Ghana is more, he's extroverted, but he's also very, if you like, bold, almost getting or something. I don't know what exact words to use. So you find that choleric. Then, of course, that type of extroverted people are the fun people, sanguine people. They're always happy. They're always fun to be with. They into fun, and they are very creative with making fun out of everything. There is meant to those type of people. Those are the sanguine people. And then on the introverted side of personality, you also have two dominant, the phlegmatic. These are very careful people. They don't want trouble. The moment they see trouble, they are just out. They are just like to making sure there is no trouble. They don't get into trouble. They don't stay around trouble. They want to get out of trouble. They talk in a way that you make things very. Then, of course, you have the melancholic. So those are the more deeply reflective people who are moody. They're always very moody, and you find them mostly indoors, moody, but they are very creative, positive side of things. They are probably some of the people you call geniuses that we have always had. So these are broadly the 4 personality traits that you will derive from the 2 broad components. A combination, nobody is a single one. So a combination of scientists and researchers have sort of defined these it's by various type of permutations and combinations and studies to see how it plays out. And of course, people have also studied how this plays out in leadership attributes of people when this type of personalities take. That's where you want this to be driven to how some of these personalities play in leadership, if we to keep it that basic.
Absolutely. One thing I've grown to understand is that a great leader is not always someone that is likable. Like the most successful leaders, in fact, that I've looked at or studied are people that generally are not the people that are more criticized because they are sometimes even very polarizing, to a great extent. So we're going to take a few characters on the African continent, and if you will, of course, we can go delve out to some of the leaders around the world. Like I would like to understand what you feel a person like, for instance, Vladimir Putin of Russia, the sort of character he is, and how significant those traits have helped or negatively impacted his country. Now, let's start from Africa. Let's take people like Gaddafi, Mugabe, Sani Abacha, Idi Amin, and as we carry on, I'll remember the rest of the names. Go ahead.
Let's begin with I take it from leaders are not necessarily to be likable. Leadership is not actually a game night, essentially. I mean, of course, there are personality traits and the traits that people will generally like a sanguine person, somebody playful and jovial, who is, fun to be around with. Probably persons like Obama is very jovial, extroverted, and so on. And of course, the Ukrainian president is a fun to be man. He was a comedian, so you could see that attributes are essentially very, another sign of leader that you look at from the African continent is President Olusegun Obasanjo. He's very, very playful. He takes everything. He combines 2 types of extroverted traits, this and the choleric trait. So you see him very authoritative, audacious, and so on. When he wants to go that way, he stands by his decision. He doesn't care who talks his God. But then, of course, play, dance, speak, fun, and do all sorts of things. Those are 2 extroverted types of traits that you find like Obasanjo. And so generally, you notice that leadership, for what it is about getting results. People want water, people want health, values that support society. Conflicts will come in personality, conflicts will come in preference, in the ability to stay through your decisions until people realize where those decisions, sometimes for generations, realize that you stood for something because of the general orientation that and mindset, the narrative around society, because we must distinguish different narratives. If there is a dominant narrative that is whether ideological or philosophical narrative and people have held to that narrative, and you discover as intuitively see a bigger vision or a destructive vision, and you want to place that amongst those people, generally resisted by people till they come to sort of go through the full gamut and say, oh, this man was saying that we did not understand. Some became at the time ahead of himself or something. And so, because it's dominantly influenced by narrative. So we dealing with the issue of leadership. I've just mentioned how, and Mugabe is that type, very choleric of person, if you like. I will speak of Jerry Rawlings, or I will speak of what do you call it? Gaddafi, Obasanjo. These are choleric type of people, are strong-willed. Leaders, most leaders come out choleric. Of course, their native sides rubs up on us, but come with a lot of courage, a lot of strong will, drive things through. Most people who emerge as leaders are the bad people, and so they bother on even being a particular context. They even bother up as being seen as dictators. Sometimes you need to step back and look at what we mean by dictator in an area we are practicing democratic values and culture, where everybody and they want to push an idea in, and the entire society is in that place. They may want to push that idea through at that point, run through at that point, and they may tend to be sort of dictatorial in the way they push that. And you find that in choleric type of people. And in that context, you will find a phlegmatic, not worthy. And phlegmatic people are hardly leaders in that sense, because that they will want to please everybody. They want to say things in ways that they think, and you can't actually aggregate for certain decisions in a way that everybody will support you. So we have to deal with all the balance, and that's why personality is different from each of the individual traits. You must discover yourself in a combination of such traits, like I've just spoken to, dominant choleric tendencies, that will make him probably President Olusegun Obasanjo of Nigeria, that will make him as audacious and strong-willed and almost dictatorial, very playful and jovial, and so on and so forth. So if you ask for other questions, we can deal with that.
Yeah, I was just, when you were talking in the last bit of what you said about, I can't remember what it was called anyway. The person that came to mind for me was President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, in your description of how, what was that again? It's gone out my head. Anyway, one of the things that I wanted to talk about was also, when you talk about, you've mentioned quite a few people who have such personalities that you would have thought that they would have been really successful at, in the styles and the personality traits that they carry in being very successful in bringing out their country, to taking the countries that they've led to enviable positions. And in the past, Africans were used to making up their minds or having opinions about their leaders by the description or the portrayal that we know about these people from Western media. So there were times where we didn't know whether a leader was good for us, whether to like the person or not. Then we waited to hear what the analysis of that person would be in Western media. And then we got to this generation where we realized that not all the leaders we've had that we thought were bad were really actually bad for us as Africans. And so if you would like to take it from the angle where you will take quite a few individuals on the African continent who could have been very good for their countries and Africa in general, but were misread or misunderstood by Africans themselves, who would those leaders be and why?
First, let's give context to the things you raised, narratives and influences. I mean, Africa is ideologically a communal society. So communalism is a dominant. We live in societies where Ubuntu. I mean, that's the more tech word that is universally now adopted for the African ideology. We live in one for all for one type of model. Our communities ideologically based on the principle that the strength for the weak person and the weak person exists because of the strong person. Person lives for the is created to serve the poor person, and that system of exchange is and support systems are the type of ideology. So even when we began to get into more complicated, more evolved social and cultural and economic terms, we tend to see things from that view as we evolve. Time as further generations which learned, which was basically capitalism, and then of course social, and of course communism, different from communalism, played out. We started imbibing and learning those attributes of our prism, our worldview, our lens of viewing the world from those. And if you go far to the Far East, like China, which seems themselves and did not allow cultural influences, and then the dominance in the media tried to make China look some devil. The idea was then look at things within their own culture. We thought we are not democratic, and which we thought the Western social evolution, promoted and built economy and its technology and so on, and reached the commanding heights, the enterprise and so on, rather than the more organized, controlled model that the Chinese people were evolving up to the point where they now. We sort of had that type of conflict, and we all to the West. We started seeing the world from the perspective of the West, and that, in my view, has distorted our worldview. It has disconnected a large way to our own inner virtues and traits, and how our personality is expressed in relative to our philosophy, our ideology. It distorted it, and so we confusions, and we are still dealing with confusion till this moment. So I guess the desire for a few things, like you just mentioned, like one of the most brilliant African continent, if you like. I don't think there is any president as educated as he is, and he stamped attribute on the Zimbabwean people. Zimbabwe is one of the most educated country on the African, probably about 91% literacy, and there is no precedent. Everywhere you go in Zimbabwe, people are well educated in terms of education and so on and so forth, and they're everywhere. I mean, population compared to their presence across the world in globalism and all of that is very evident, the kind of education and learning. And that was Mugabe for you. And generally, that Western systems, and we know what happened to him, under Western systems will be seen from that perspective as iron. He wanted protection. He wanted the idea, because he had come to understand things more, not only from a point of view, but from an ideological point of view. Haven't read extensively to the West, so he had this idea to sort of stem the tide of invasion of West, but Africa was more pluralistic and was led colonialism traits that we have left. It affected the way we perceive Mugabe, and he, being a little bit of a temperament that was, if you like, more like the more choleric type of temperament, and the other traits that were required to galvanize the people, pull them together around these ideas under the propaganda and probably even CIA and Western attempt him down, created him as somebody who Africans probably saw as a dictator. And that is the type of thing that Western propaganda must have made, created in our minds of then, of course, you can add that perspective to perhaps his ratio to want to do, and that pushed him to the other side of his personality, and therefore he didn't probably other types of traits that would have seen that was useful to gather around himself in terms of the fun man, the man that we will find in some other African leaders like Kwame or from East Africa and so on and so forth, Mobutu and all of that. So generally, it is this sense that we are beginning that really we had ideological conflicts, we political and economic wars that were going on, and we had not emerged as an African to be conscious this is what we are facing. But as we saw our leaders emerge from our midst and began to corrupt and abuse public offices by taking our resources and partner the West to completely loot resources from colonialism, traits we found in the way they instituted colonialism, led us to that type of conclusion about the West. Some of our leaders, at vulnerability of some of them to corruption, worsened our take on them. So there is, for us to critically look at reality, we must also look at the spirit that drove them, and the fact that some of them did not even overcome their base personalities, and so were dictatorship to push their destiny, and they sought rescue people outside of us. They generally went in that way to get political support to be able to do what they did. So in trying to look at leader, we must then begin to more down to earth in analyze who they are and what we need to, because leadership in Africa, actually, if we had followed from an African point of view, leadership in Africa is not centered on persons. In a communal system, is centered on community vision, communities, and so on. The community sits down, takes a decision, sets up a vision, everybody. So if you see the way we call our kings, the Igbo people will their kings or and the organization or Haineze, king and his people, as a composite unit, which drives society. So that is culturally within us. And for us who are even in, we have also similar traits, that communal systems, there is usually nothing until he carries the view, the aspirations. The moment the king is disconnected with the people, he's king amongst ourselves until we sort of got ourselves corrupted with a lot of things totally uncommunal on Africans. And our kings were not away from us. They were with us. The day kings began to British monarch and so on and so forth, things that sort of began to abuse the type of ordinariness that we placed around kings and the reverence we gave to that ordinariness individual, because the individual carries that vision of the people. And an individual does not have that spirituality that carries that vision. Igbo people will say the Ofo has left him. That's the instrument of authority, that spirit of authority, which is symbolized maybe in some of the artists to symbolize leadership, has left him. People sort of say, even though he's a god, that god ceases to be a god in Africa. So that's the way we were, and so is a key factor in analyzing things, and we must analyze it looking at people like a lot of, for instance, of course, I mean, Arab sentiments, and we Africans, we are made to see Arab slavery, the whole history of transatlantic slave and the role of Arab, and the way we also were taught to see Islam and the battle between Islam and Christianity in the West, and all the colonialism and the desire to use the religious instruments and so on to play politics, and have invested that in us till today. That poison of religion, that poison. I mean, in Africa, religion is multiple, so we maintain over religion. There were multiple ways, there were multiple ways of enjoyment. So if you go to an indigenous society, because of the plurality of systems of worship over religion, we interacted.
But right.
The moment we started seeing religion brought in with one particular focus, and I began to sort of build ideologies that were not actually things of some of those religions that came to us. Christianity, which is actually a purely an African originator, because it started in what they call today Middle East. But when you go to the times, when you go to time to when we look at the African continent, when we look at African continent, Egypt, Canaan, and all of that, we are true African constituencies. The Hebrew people were not Caucasians. The Hebrew people were not Middle in the way they present them to us today in the 21st century. Historically, they were different religion itself, and the way we saw religion and in those times were pure, more liberal ways of engaging God, other than the way the West had been the Western characteristics when it went up there and they brought it us. And then we started fighting from a Western perspective and viewed religion from a team, which is about competition. Africans were not necessarily people who Africans were sharing.
That's right.
So,
in my
yeah, go ahead.
In my understanding, I think that the what's the word to call it? The way the African religion was hijacked by the West was solely and purely because they needed, like you said, it was from their point of view, religion was about competition. For them, it was a tool to be used to reflect the superiority of their minds and over us. And of course, when they came in and saw a people of culture, a people that their values were totally different from what the West had brought in, they needed to destroy the foundation that kept us and made us the sort of people we were when they came in, which is a proud people, even though we were not capitalists in our thinking in the society that they met. So, of course, when they hijacked our religion, at that time, we were quite comfortable with there was no time in African history where Africans were competing about whose God was superior and not, until these people came and took over a religion that they found on the African continent, took it away, renamed it, restructured it, and brought it back as some kind of foreign religion and put it on us, and of course, to our detriment. Just before we carry on, before you go on with other leaders and that you might have in mind, I just want to take a few reads, because there's some brother who sent in. Why do I think he's a brother? The name just looks to me like it's a brother. From Zimbabwe. He says, I'm going to take a few reads here. He said, good evening. I am watching from Zimbabwe. All we need in Africa is for African leaders to unite. I think he means we must have one country called Africa, one president, one currency, instead of being failing leaders who are leaders of about less than 20 million, while Indian and Chinese leaders of billions. Right. I think there is. Let us not waste time. Our resources are being taken from us without our prices. We are rich, but we've become poor because of greedy leaders who enjoy selling our resources at biased prices. That's a slavery. That's slavery in some percentage. Why it is African currency is always less than the West, yet all reserved in our ground. All reserves, I think, are in our ground. So basically, what this person is talking about, I think, is something PLO Lumumba and Dr. Arikana Chayombari Kwayo keeps talking about, as in the fact that the West has divided African countries to little bitty countries where we come as little units to negotiate with heavy and powerful countries, and we're not able to get to move very far, as opposed to coming as a unit, as a people on the African continent. If we were to be seen as a country, we would have been in the billions, and we'll be able to negotiate for ourselves good deals when we do meet on the table, where they normally meet to cut all these deals for themselves. So it's a bit of a, let's see, real Ovara or Anyadike Emenike. Greetings to you. Cletus says hello all the way from Tanzania. Radio TV presenters and low-level leaders should stop battering the leaders. Rather, they should point out the important matters that have impact in the society, because everywhere they even clap for leaders, while it's their duty to do things for us, because they are using our money. I know sometimes some of the things we're writing, we go ahead of ourselves, and sometimes we
one
kind
to
of like,
read from, it's probably Anyadike Emenike. As that looks like the way my name would go, Emenike. He simply says, does the reasoning call for signs of some sort of psychological evaluation of aspiring? I mean, he's actually looking at the idea of personality. But again, when we talk of personality, we must look at the way personality vested in values. Personality is neutral. When you invest it with values, then you begin to see it manifest. Some person who has a klepto or sort of pursuit of materialism and so on and so forth, personality, drop personality in that context, and when that comes out, you see more base, more instead of more ideological and philosophical and liberal worldview, he tends to go the grabbing way. So look at how the neutral element of personality and place it both in ideology, like we've seen in the way we have probably judged some of our leaders, in the very disposition that value dispositions that people. Why are certain countries? This book, Values Matter, where we gauged Nigeria, Ghana with South Korea, and so on and so forth. All of them departing this economic journey at virtually the same economic parameters. Most of the Asian tigers had emerged, and if you look, that author was dealing with in his research, he went to the fact that what made them different is values. So even when we tend to want to deal with the West, you discover that over time we dropped our values. We began to see some that community. We began to support. I mean, trade with slave cartels. You compare human beings. So we to that base. This is a community people lived peacefully, largely. I mean, there is no society where and we had systems of resolving conflict, but largely people had methods of living peacefully and supported themselves, at least in community groups, and dealt with conflicts with other community groups in some particular way. We saw those expressions. So distinguish between culture and modernization, civilization and modernization. We probably have problem understanding that civil is completely different from modernization. And we went for modernization and destroyed our system of civilization, because Africans were some of the most civilized people when the Europe went us. We were civilized people in the way we were not barbaric the way they presented us, but they created modernism where they began to bring sophisticated technology, cars, and so on, because of all this, the the scientific traditions that they had turned to technology with the rise of the Greek Empire and all of that. And modernization became the in-thing way societies and imperialism began to work at some point. Technology played a great role. When they reached that height, if we trace that back, the basis of science and technology, whether it is in medicine, whether in mathematics and so on, is traceable still. But when they took it, they had advanced it a notch and also at some particular. So when they started bringing those things back to us, fascinated us. We were civilized, but they wanted to show us some sense of modernity. And this sense of modernity tripped us. And some people began to go for the base and sort of lost the value of a civilized society in pursuit of modernism. And those traits affected the way we apply personality to the opportunities that were emerging. And so our people began to go to the base part of their human, rather than the spirituality that was deeply, and when they were still barbaric. And the Caucasians in the Caucasus Mountains, that's some civilization, and sort of even some form of modernization was building in Babylon. Ethiopians, actually Africans, yeah. And of course, you want to talk of some of those Mesopotamian and all sorts of early civilizations, which are purely African civilizations that were going on.
You know, the interesting thing you did right now was helping us. You know, a lot of us mix up the idea of what modernization and what civilization actually is. And so we judge ourselves as Africans based on modernization as though we are uncivilized, simply because we're using the measuring stick of the West of what modernization is, and we think that's what civilization is, and it's absolutely not. I'm very happy with that. And Real Ovaranya,
it's an important thing we learn that distorts us, because we don't sit down. I mean, have learned their language, so we probably did not understand that these are things in a technical sense that we had. African remains one of the most civilized, humane society throughout history. To be humane, to be empathetic, to be compassionate, to be supportive one for another, be kind to people is an African trait. It's deeply part of us. In fact, our whole spirituality and ideology is based. We owed that only to ourselves, but community, and it is rooted in our belief in our divinity. Those divinity are in plural forms, or whether it's so. We are not merely connected to these values in the way the West connects to it. We were connected.
That's right.
Deeply to our divinity. Garbage into water. Immediately you get the gods. If you cut down a tree, they are going to environmentalism, scientific point of view. It was beyond.
That's right.
Science. It was it was deep in our spirituality, because trees, water bodies, everything had a sense of life out of it. We were part of that society. So all the years of environmentalism and so on were naturally lifestyles of Africans and that nation. And of course, they started making big role, technology, abusing the environment, and so on and so forth. Disconnected, the scientific tradition completely the idea of spirituality to science. And so
that's right.
When they did that, they handed over science by mere study of nature from the objective point of view. We did not see science from merely an objective point of view. Our sense of science was deeper than the objective point of view. Not that we are disconnected point of view, but we have probably not developed it to the point where they now pursued it purely from an objective point of view and lost the spirituality that Africa had. And today the world is in deep crisis, as we find out today, and of course also continue to throw that how that adjusts the personality of the character of various persons and how it affects personality.
That's right. This is so powerful. One of the things that when you were talking, the way African cultures existed and the way we reverence nature is that everything God made, we saw God in it. The trees, the waters, everything. So African culture had conditioned Africans. African spiritualism had conditioned Africans to understanding the supreme being in everything that has been made by nature.
Yeah.
So when we reverenced, when we saw a tree, we just did not see a tree. We knew there was life in that tree, and that life came from a higher power and a higher force. Yes.
So
God everything we did,
we saw our
yes,
shared.
Yes.
Shared,
and that is
Africa
what they destroyed. That's what the West and the so-called modernization destroyed. Just to carry on with real Ovaranya Anyadike Emenike, continuing from his last comment, he said, I write this because these traits could influence a leader's tendency to engage in graft or abuse of office. And Makoba Molapo says, watching from Lesotho, Washington Stanley, all the way from somewhere in Europe, I know. He says Malema of South Africa is the only politician in Africa as of today who's ready and willing to confront the West on their never-ending colonialism. And he goes on to say, Omoyele Sowore of Nigeria is frustrated because Nigeria youths are not seeing what he's seeing, even though that be attributed to him, Sowore allowing OBJ to use him against GEJ and dumping. Nevertheless, Sowore is capable of something somehow. Anyone who rejects Western passports like Sowore did, America has ultimately refused to be obedient slave and can contribute in rebuilding Nigeria and Africa in general. I just wanted to take a little more read there. So just as we carry on, we're going to be rounding up in about 15 minutes. Just to better help an ordinary person who doesn't want too many information or sophistication to understanding how and what to look out for in a leader moving forward. Now we are in this woke generation, so what leaders or what leadership styles or what characters on the African continent would you use as an example to point out to an ordinary person who is looking to make a decision, especially in countries where they're about to have elections on the African continent, to say that these are the sort of people we need, and this is what to look out for. These are the sort of traits to look out for. Just because this person sounds a certain way or is aggressive or sounds autocratic doesn't necessarily mean that they are bad for as a leader. Or if you wanted to talk to an ordinary man to understanding the sort of things we should look out for in our leaders, who would you use on the African continent, and what will that characteristic be?
I think leadership works anywhere is here of servant leadership. Servant leadership comes with great connections with empathy. And so it is difficult to because everybody is capable of empathy. Everybody, cleric person, even the sanguine person, everybody is capable of empathy. It is whether you want to develop that quality that within your own personality disposition. The moment people, no matter what kind of personality that makes you, if you are in, because different situations need different types of expression of traits. If you are in a place where you are leadership amongst bullies, you need a choleric disposition to deal with that. You don't need a phlegmatic because if you get you embolden a bully, if you are phlegmatic and you want to please him, you have to confront him. And so you cannot prescribe a particular of disposition, personality disposition to every context. You have to be broad. You have to recognize the state of evolution at which you are. If people have, for instance, if we go to Nigeria framed into a feudal dictatorial systems, even so-called packaged democracy, because I tell people, if you go back to Africa, we're a republic. Africans are communal people. So when they reach it in a formalized way and present it to us as democracy, add liberal communal way of living and engagement with one another, take decisions from a communal perspective and a community interest-based perspective, which is what. So if you look into communalism, the idea of democracy, so it takes it and formalized it and gave to us. So, but in a context where our people have base level of pursuing modernism to the and rejected our real value of civilization, you want to then have a more leader. Because if you go, we've already been framed, we've already by the ideology and our historians, whether it is from the colonial iron hand that created our militaries and our police, that instruments of state to repress that. So the policeman in Nigeria and in most African states is an enemy of that. Usually is not as it ought to be, but that is the culture that and military dictatorships and so on has handed over to us. So we are still wanting to snap out of that. So speaking clearly about it, we must then be sure that in that text, you then want a deeply empathetic, deeply connecting personality who is listening, who can the pains and submit to extract the views of the people and get them, to back to the sense of consensual decision making of Africa. With a dictator, you get resisted because already dictatorship has awakened us. We already awakened. So you can see the woke generation is already now rising against this type of things with every opportunity that they have. And so they need leaderships that are deeply connected with the essence of their person, or spirituality, if you want me to put it that way, in the way we engage. So it is in that way society where people are laid back, where they have, then you need a more revolt, a leader that, will push them to awaken and to that. So it is actually because like I said, leadership is neutral, and like Anyadike would have said, that neutrality is based in the combination and knowledge which is ideology. Sometimes whether the person has the right set of values, are not there, no matter how grand the information an evil genius. If you have somebody who is have all the information and knowledge, and then his values are, deceptive, he uses his skills, means people talk with them, but at the end of it ends up like the Nigeria, the whole of Nigeria, because of its frustration of bad leadership and corruption. It did not understand the full scope. You raised Goodluck Jonathan, more empathetic and humble disposition. So people were not with that type of servant leadership. And so they wanted things to annul. They were used to a dictator. They wanted people to change society, forget that the aggregate influence, the aggregate consciousness of society determines the power of. And so if that leader is not evolved, give him power at the base level, like we have seen over the past 7 going in Nigeria, they will come out and swing you with all the good words, all the news and so on and so forth. But when the person is the context, you begin to see him evolve. You begin to see the real deep, you can't run away from how deeply you are. And then we had a person with a feudal disposition, a very liberal society, and everything seemed to be collapsing. Our country and Africa is ashamed of the leadership that Nigerians offer. I would not prescribe a part of personal leadership for anything, but I will contextually. We should be able to do what he calls psychoanalysis of the person on what has he been doing. Can he deal with plurality and diversity? Can he deal with it in an empathetic way? Does he have to use both the empathy and the strong will to together? That balance, that femininity and masculinity balance is required to build a system, must be found in any leadership and a context that we have.
Absolutely, there is a time and season for everything, everybody, every leadership style. There is a time and season where it is, of course, more will be needed and appreciated. And sometimes people come at the wrong time, and sometimes they come ahead of their time, as you mentioned. So quickly acknowledging the comments, and then we'll go on to the last beat, as we call it, round up today's conversation. It's been absolutely wonderful, me Abiye, to be honest with you. Boshelo Ngwato says, hello from the Republic of South Africa. Very interesting topic, she says. Real Ovaranya says, Anyadike Menike says, are there any forms of legal? You're gonna respond to this, but just let me finish taking the reads first. He says, are there any forms of legal frameworks that could aid in the selection process of leaders, at least beyond the patronizing question by electoral bodies? And Apex War, greetings to you too. Helen D says, while strong personality is great, but empathy or compassion is highly needed for leadership. That's absolutely right. Washington Stanley Package Democracy, according to guests.
It's a type of strong personality itself. So the context in which we use.
That's right. That's right.
A person can be a very strong trait and a strong personality. It is the degree of presence of a particular trait. It could be empathy, choleric, and bold and courageous. So courage could be very and over plentiful in a country, could be damaging when it doesn't have the other side of it. So balance is actually
that's right.
What is pretty important.
Balance, and in the context of which it's relevant at the time. Package democracy, according to guests, exactly is Nigeria democracy system. Correct modernization and civilization are not same. Good thoughts. And yes. Deceptive democracy is tantamount to dictatorship, especially as in Nigeria. And as we round up, finally, I'm always tempted to want to compare what is attainable in Europe presently as opposed to what is possible in Africa. Look at what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. See how many months has gone by and the war has continued. Yet, the West, even though some people say that there is this proxy war going on between America and Russia because of the sort of support America has given to Ukraine, I'm tempted to want to understand, in your opinion, if a Putin was found on the African continent as a leader and wants to do what he thinks is right by his people for his country, why do you think we would have failed even before we started? Why do you think that the West have not been able to deal with Vladimir Putin the way they would have taken out an African leader in a similar situation?
I think you probably give various perspectives type of answer. From the objective way, Putin has nuclear weapons. The most objective of looking at it, and drop a nuclear bomb, the whole of West, anywhere, civilization. I mean, the mutual assured destruction doctrine. If we drop bomb, you drop bomb, the whole of the Western civilization. So that again, and Putin perhaps has some sort of technically more superior weapons. It may have challenges with its delivery, but in terms of the certain capabilities, mutual assured destruction. So that is one context in which you find, the sense that there is mutual assured destruction as of bipolar warfare that they undertake simply tells them that no matter, they only do this low intensity and try to strangulate each other based on the rules them that war is based on. They will only try to strangle each other, weaken each person. Don't go beyond that because they will destroy themselves. Until two madmen, very strong personalities come and their sense of and all of that gets out of the roof and then they destroy themselves. And probably Africa should not be involved in that type of warfare if they get to that point. So that's one context. You want to see it from that perspective. But again, also, you will also have to see from the personality context, which Putin is a strong personality. Forget about what they will say about his hold over his people. If he has not held his hold over the people, the West would have invaded with their own ideology. There is also the other ideological warfare, apart from Putin's personality, that we are looking. You must look at context. You must look at perspective. There are multiple looking at this. You cannot say the war or what's happening there has persisted. One person has not destroyed one person. Just from one perspective, can look at it from the leadership personality. You can look at it from technology. You can look at and to Putin. It's very difficult to hold the people who have seen liberal views. The liberal view is not really liberal. It is this of injecting finance, competition, and we are promoting democracy, and we are looking for a market. We are looking superiority, and we don't need to fight. That's the difference with Africa. What we've lost in Africa, there is no sense of inferior in Africa. We see it as complementary traits, and it is not something of pride. It is something that draws that if you see somebody injured, you want to go help. You don't go and dominate it, take things from that. So, in my view, these battles, the battles of superiority, inferiority, and so on, are based traits. No matter what modernism and whatever they think about their own civilizations and so on, they are based. They do not enhance the dignity of the human person. They do not show the universality of our humanity, our responsibility to God and to man and to human. That's the duty of man, to serve God in every other man and in humanity. And so the moment we don't do that and we think that one person is superior and inferior, then we've lost the essence of our humanity. What the West, Western ideology, whether it is capitalist, promotes competition, or it is their warsology superiority, which should ordinarily be used to serve humanity, is used to serve hegemonic interests, and so forth. Those are not the things we should continue to live by. We should reach African essence and apply our personality, jovial personality, or whether it's a strong personality, we should apply them with enhancing human dignity and the promotion of communal sense of living. We probably have lost the presence of our ideology. We need to get back and promote communalism against whether you call it communism or capitalism ideologies.
And finally, as we round up, I'll take the last set of reads and we'll call it a day with your last contributions. Yes, Real of Arayase, exactly. Putin has the bombs and the control of the gas and pipelines. Apex War says destroy the legacy.
The gas to gas supplies from Putin.
Yeah.
So they don't want to actually get into cold if gas is not supplied, and Europe will just.
That's right. This winter is an uncertain one for us in Europe. And Apex War says, destroy the legacy of the 1884 Berlin Conference and the abandonment of capitalism for Ubuntu communalism. will solve our leadership issues, but we, the people, must make the necessary sacrifice to get this. Absolutely, Putin holds all the ACs, Washington Stanley says. Gas and nuclear weapons, it's gone. It's going to be real cold winter in Europe because Putin has stopped supplying gas momentarily. Helen D from America says, I agree. Apex War says, a political revolution, then a cultural revolution. You know what?
I think cultural revolution first before you might write rationale and spirit. You will then begin to cultural revolution. I mean, the cultural communication.
And the cultural revolution will have to start from the mind, and then we'll be able to empower.
Generally, a thing of the spirit. It's not outside. What is the type of rationality and spirit?
So Apex War, we should go the other way around, where cultural revolution, and then the people are awake and alive to their responsibilities because now they know, now they understand, and then political revolution can follow. Yes. So as we round up today, Mie Abie, thank you so very much. As we round up today, finally, on a scale of 1 to 10, African past leaders to the present day ones or aspiring ones, just give from off your head who you remember, the leadership styles and the ones that you fancy will or you reckon will be good.
Difficult to for people like me. One person is exceptionally good and the other person is wrong. I mean, I would always want to fall to context and see how such persons play. But if we want to put a general context of people who have stood for Africa, African society, then of course you will give it to people. The revolutions that the likes of Kwame Nkrumah, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Obafemi Awolowo, and Gaddafi recently. In some way, no matter how crude we have been made to believe, it was one person who stood up to the West in some way. Hence, if we get data about all other things, notwithstanding in that sense that he stood up and wanted real Africans to thrive, you will even give him pass marks having broken from a sense that the West was actually manipulating us. So it's a one person did well. We just need to put it in the context and say, I would give it to
absolutely.
Dash us in some sense, and I would have wished that he had that flair of sitting down with the way Jerry Rawlings will go to the farm, people discuss and talk and try to galvanize the society. Not a big man. If we were a real servant, had that, he would have probably succeeded a lot. And so no single trait of leadership will give you success. Personality will give you success. You must have to look for how to build your personality traits to be able to accommodate different tendencies and to probably be a good leader. Thank you.
Yeah, I know I said that was going to be the last bit, but Rio Lavaranya has reminded us the legal framework. He wants you to respond to that. The legal framework. Are there any forms of legal frameworks that could aid in the selection process of leaders, at least beyond the patronizing question by electoral bodies? So finally, that's it, and we call it a day.
I'm not a lawyer, but I think we have already found ourselves in chip selection process that allows the will of majority to triumph. I, again, would always say, even though generally human beings tend to be good, like a lot of people say, democracy under ideological influence of a few people is very dangerous. So you could see that the West they came and give scholarship, they take us to Chevening, they give us and they send us back and they give awards, CNN Journalist of the Year. We are propaganda missionaries, and then they put us that height, and we are hailing a CNN journalist, but it's just a propaganda tool, a symbol of Western influence. Begin to gravitate towards and aspire to become journalists will win a Chevening scholarship because we're not educating ourselves in a truly African context. So if it's to look, I mean, let's look at the last Nigerian election and the results that have come out of that election, that they came out of election. It was all propaganda by supported David Axelrod, who came with a Western ideology to prescribe change, and then we were all drumming change, and emotionally we didn't think deep enough of Ayadike will describe as psychoanalyzing this person of time where we are. And then we are back to headsmen killing people, bandits, kidnapping, fundamentalist religious people, not our systems, militants emerging from nowhere, all sorts of course taking us, and poverty is a lot. Education is, I mean, that's the propaganda does, and that was democracy, as we call it, packaged that had no meaning, that we did not think deeply about, and so it's a delicate when you talk of legal framework, because the aggregate consciousness of the people, like people deserve the type of leaders they get. We need a lot like cultural revolution. We need to culturally awaken back to ourselves. I mean, who is that leader? When that leader comes on board, you would see the way people will gravitate towards him, because he will connect with all the people, and that's in a meaningful way, not in abusive way, not in a destructive way, but in a meaningful way, profiling a problem with an empathy, coming to our level, educating us with the understanding of issues that convinces us, and then we'll gravitate towards it. If that in which democracy and the legal frameworks that we have work, then of course, I will always say that democracy will be the best system that we have put. And democracy is not I don't believe that democracy is a Western thing. It's the type of thing that we have been told by systems. African culture took decisions in communities. That is the way we operated. We took decisions. We knew the aspirations of and that is leadership. Leadership for us is the aspiration of a community invested in a person, and the spirit of that, on the soul of a person. And we all seated ourselves around that because the person is promoting those ideals and carries that spirit that carries the collective. That's what democracy means to me, than the more formalized them that can throw up things in the propaganda.
That's absolutely right. And on that note, you couldn't have put it any better, Miabiye. Thank you so very much for joining us today. And I'm looking forward to another engagement such as this on other topics we talked about behind the scenes. I will catch up with you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Susan. Nice being.
All right. So really quickly, I just want to sum it up in the best way that I can in a couple of minutes or seconds, is that for some of you who would have joined and gone out and come back in, or joined us a bit late, one of the things, a few things we should carry away from today's conversation is that civilization is not the same as modernization. And Africans will need to begin to understand, to stop weighing themselves according to the modernization standards of the West. Africans were always civilized, were most civilized group of people that existed even before the West came with all of the doctrines that messed up our minds as a people. And a cultural revolution is what we must begin before we even go on to a political revolution. Why? Because when the West came, when the slave masters came, when the colonials came, they destroyed our culture first. Why? Because the moment they destroyed our culture, they destroyed our minds. They captured our minds. And so once the mind is messed up, you've conquered the person. So a cultural revolution first. We are a people of great culture, great relevance, because we were a civilization that was far ahead and very much superior in at the time we made that connection with the West. Also, they are leaders for a time and season, for a reason. So every time we want to make a decision on who we should be giving our vote or who should we should give that support to, we must not look at it at a superficial level only. So someone can come across as very empathetic, but that should not be misconstrued as a sign of weakness, as some of us have done in the past, and we're paying for it dearly. So, in as we move forward into the future, on all of the countries on the African continent, as we choose our leaders, we must bear in mind to choose a leader that is fit for the time needed for the season and for the era. The strengths and weaknesses can be something that is whether or not you perceive someone to be strong or weak. They all those attributes are all things that are needed to connect and become a successful leader, and every time in season have a specific kind of leader that is needed. And so as we move forward to choosing our leaders, those are the sort of things we should carry at the back of our minds. And that is, in a nutshell, some of the points that our guests have spoken about. And Abonene, I know you came in a bit late, but thank you so much. He says, yes. And thank you so much, Real Variant. This was very engaging. Helen D, thank you. And Stanley, Washington, Apex War, all of our brothers and sisters from Zimbabwe, from Tanzania, from Mozambique, from everywhere else on the African continent that joined us today. Thank you so very much. And we do look forward to seeing you again next weekend, God willing. It's been such an interesting conversation. Go back and play the video, watch it again, share with your friends, like, follow, subscribe to all our channels. My name is Susan, and God bless you. I love you all.